Hey everyone, it's Dr. Sarah. I figured I would do a get ready with me and talk about how myself and Dr. Jason, my husband, decided to become chiropractors 1 year after getting married, quitting our jobs, and moving to Atlanta to start chiropractic school. So I'll preface that our stories kind of intertwine, and that's how we became chiropractors. So before we became chiropractors, Dr. Jason and I met in college. We met at Bloomsburg University our freshman year of college, and we were really good friends for about 4 years before we started, or 5 years actually, before we started dating. And we were both in health related fields prior to getting married or dating. So prior to us getting married, I graduated from Bloomsburg University with a dual bachelor's in speech pathology and anthropology. And you're probably like, how does that make sense? And actually my parents probably thought that too. But I was taking speech pathology classes because my mom is actually a speech pathologist, and I always wanted to be in the health field. And I had been going to work with my mom ever since I was little. And I just really wanted to be in the health field. I actually originally wanted to become an occupational therapist, but Bloomsburg University did not have occupational therapy as a major. So I thought speech path was the closest to it. And there's a whole other story about why I decided to go to Bloomsburg, even though they did not have my major that I wanted to go into. So I started taking speech pathology classes. My mom, like I said, my mom is a speech pathologist, and I started taking some electives, and I started taking, someone told me anthropology was a really easy elective. So I thought, okay, I'll take some anthropology classes, get some easy A's, and then go from there. So my first anthropology class that I ever took was an intro to cultural anthropology, and a really wonderful professor. She was so cool, so interesting, really traveled. I always wanted to travel, so I knew that was something that was interesting to me. So I took a cultural anthropology class. I received an A, and I loved it. So I was really interested in learning more, and we had a really amazing anthropology department at Bloomsburg University. So I kept taking classes, and I ended up having enough to have a minor, and then eventually had a major. So I graduated Bloomsburg with a dual major in speech path and anthro. You need a master's to do anything with either of those two things. And I really wasn't in love with clinical speech pathology. It did not set my heart ablaze. And my mom was just talking to me about the changes in the profession and the field. And I think it's a really wonderful field. I absolutely love speech pathologists, but for me, it just wasn't gonna click. And I wasn't motivated enough to do the really competitive master's program. And also I really didn't want to do archaeology. I was interested in the cultural anthropology piece of it. So I was actually really lucky, and I got a very, very cool internship in Philadelphia in college, but at the end of my college career, where I was working with a nonprofit organization in Philadelphia that did a lot of education for incarcerated families. So part of our education that we did was geared toward HIV prevention, and there was a ton of work that we were doing with HIV prevention. I had also studied a lot about Africa in my classes. So HIV, we were obviously talking about HIV and the impact it had in Africa at the time. So I had already had an interest in HIV prevention and education. I did this really amazing internship program with an amazing organization in Philly. My spoolie is like covered in crazy stuff. Okay. So that's what made me interested. So then I was like, what do I do now? I couldn't really do anything with either of my majors, but I obviously needed a job. So I was through a lot of trial and error and talking to a lot of my advisors who I had and some mentors that I had become close with at the time, I came upon a master's of public health. So at this point, I decided I would become a master of public health, and I decided to go to the University of Pittsburgh and do their master's of public health policy and administration track. It was actually cheaper than going to Drexel at the time, even though Drexel was much closer, and I lived with two guys I met on Craigslist. at University of Pittsburgh, which actually ended up being fine, but that was like a really crazy story too. So at that time, right before I started my master's program, Jason and I had reconnected. After college, we were chatting, and I was moving to Pittsburgh. After I moved to Pittsburgh, we started dating. And Jason was actually at the time working for the Lebanon VA hospital in the kinesiotherapy department. So he was helping veterans transition from PT home to do some stuff at home. And that was a really cool and interesting job. His background is in exercise science. So then I'm gonna have to make another video, I think.